Hi, welcome back, and good to see you again for the third installment of my Whiteboard Techniques webcast. And first, just a quick review. The first week, we laid out how PLC work helped us design some new instructional methods that were sort of beyond their traditional instructional methods. And we found that what worked the best for improving student achievement wasn't outside the classroom. It wasn't what we taught that made the biggest difference. It also wasn't the macro design of lessons, but it was the micro level learning experience, the moment-to-moment interactions between the teacher and students that made the biggest impact on student achievement and made it so that half of our kids that were allowed to hide before couldn't hide from the moment-to-moment interactions in the classroom. Of course, we came up with our whiteboarding strategies, and that was all based off the philosophy that I went over on the second video about 3 higher. That it's not using the whiteboards that matters, but it's how you use them. Where you need high visibility so you can see all students and their thinking. You need high information, so it's not meant for knowledge building, it's meant for thinking and getting your thinking down. And you need high frequency. You can't just whiteboard once or twice in a lesson. It's throughout the majority of the lesson. And then, of course, you need immediate feedback and revision. So once the student has shown their thinking, they have to revise it, and you need to visibly see that they've revised it on their whiteboard. So now, on this third installment, I want to give you the big picture, because our goal is really to change the traditional tools of a teacher. And the traditional tools are something that's really, I think, unquestioned. For example, if I said, hey, the other day I used the raised hand technique in class, or I used the sit and listen to me technique in class, people look at you like you're strange, right? We don't think of them as tools and techniques, we just do them because when we close our eyes and picture teachers, that's what we see. And we've designed a holistic instructional program that will make it so you don't have to use these ever. Because when you look at the toolboxes we have, they can fill in all the time in a classroom. The hard part, though, is it's a lot harder to perfect new tools than it is to continually use the tools that we've been used to our entire lives. When we went to school, we grew up with the idea of one person talks at a time in a classroom. And so a lot of the tools you're going to see they change that micro-level learning experience drastically. So let's just take a look at it. This is our Tier 1 model. You'll notice we start with purpose setting. The what of the lesson, what are we learning, why are we learning it, and how are we going to know we've learned it? And that's just, I think, really important to any lesson. And you can use any of the 3 toolboxes and tools to set that up. So the first toolbox is interactive modeling, and we borrow from who I think is an absolute genius, Chris Biffle, who invented whole brain teaching. And whole brain teaching is gigantic, it's enormous. There are so many things in whole brain teaching. There's a huge part of it that is management, classroom culture, and there's a huge part of it that is writing and ELA. But we're just going to focus on the micro-level learning tools. We call it interactive modeling. And what interactive modeling is, basically is the teacher thinks out loud, and then students try on that thinking. But then we have the 3 higher whiteboarding, and that's where students do get to show their thinking. And 100% visibility, they all show their thinking on a whiteboard, they get feedback, they revise it. And so the 3 higher whiteboarding tools then kind of supplement the interactive modeling tools, and they help each other out. And then finally you have our to-do or cooperative learning tools, which we've adapted from Spencer Kagan, who is, in my opinion, also a genius. So Chris Biffle, Spencer Kagan, they've been working on this for many, many years, many decades, and we're borrowing some of those most effective tools, and we're adding them also to our whiteboard toolbox. And so when you have sort of these 3 toolboxes, and you can go back and forth between them when needed, you have all you need, all the tools you'd ever need in order to kind of do away with one talks at a time. And of course, finally, and yes, this is more traditional, there is independent work, or as Kagan would call it, solo time, for students to practice the skills that they've learned while in the cycle. But the great thing about it, and 3 higher whiteboarding kind of leads to this, since you've seen visibly what students are thinking, you also know which students are struggling. And so while the rest of the students are practicing what they learned, you're going to pull small groups and work with students that weren't able to learn it in the whole group format. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the two toolboxes that I'm not going to talk about very much, because the rest of this year we're going to focus on the whiteboarding tools. Mainly because I'm not a whole brain teaching trainer. I love the tools. I think everyone should use those tools in their classroom, but I'm not here to train you on them. Go to wholebrainteaching.com. I've watched hundreds of hours of whole brain videos of teachers doing whole brain, and also Chris Biffle and his associates. They do webcasts all the time. And the great thing about it is the majority of the resources in whole brain teaching are absolutely free. So at the heart of whole brain teaching and our interactive modeling, it's all about utilizing the 5 memory centers of the brain. So we remember what we see, hear, we remember our movements, remember how we feel. And so it's trying to get as much of the brain as possible interacting with the learning. We know that the visual cortex in the back of the brain is extremely powerful. It has an almost infinite capacity for remembering. And then we know that the motor cortex is powerful in that it has endurance. It can basically, you can remember things forever with the motor cortex. It's not also the limbic system, the feeling in the center of the brain. Whole brain teaching is a lot of fun, and it's very interactive for kids. And so it gets them to feel, it gets them to enjoy their learning, and it helps them learn more. Finally, whole brain teaching is all about short little chunks of lessons where kids learn, and then they turn and they teach each other in small repetitious sequences. So it fits really well with what we know about the brain. So here what I did was I took each tool that we were going to adopt and I created a visual for that tool, and I divided them into 3 sets, and I'll give Chris Biffle all the credit for that. He's great at leveling, and I like the idea of a rookie toolbox, a professional toolbox, and an all-star toolbox. And the rookie toolbox is what I want to try to get all teachers to do. There's a lot of tools here. The main one is our 4-step engagement cycle, which Chris Biffle talks about in length in whole brain teaching, where you get students' attention with something like class, and they say yes. Then you say something like mirror words, and they say mirror words. And then as you talk in short chunks and move, students do the same with you. But you speak really briefly, only 30 seconds, and then finally you clap twice and say teach. Students clap twice and say okay, and they turn and they teach each other using the movements and gestures the last 30 seconds of things that have been said. Now, that's whole brain teaching in a nutshell. There are many different tools, many different variations on that. The professional toolbox uses some really cool techniques using sort of kinesthetic learning and symbols, which, believe it or not, Spencer Kagan talks about too. Not as in depth as whole brain teaching, but there's things called brainies that Chris Biffle invented, where you can orally write, like something like the dog ran, so capital letter, end mark. And so getting kids to write orally like this is a great way. So when we go teach, you can also go brainies, and kids say okay, they turn and they use the brainy gestures to orally write their thoughts back and forth. So that's kind of a fun thing for our professional toolbox. Finally, our all-star toolbox has a lot of the variety of whole brain teaching. Whole brain teaching is all about variety, about many different types of tools throughout the year. One of my favorite tools here is teach an object, where you literally have kids, let's say, teach their shoes. So you clap twice and say teach, they clap twice and say okay, and then they teach their shoe. You could do it with a stuffed animal or anything like that. But that's the tip of the iceberg with whole brain teaching. It's a beautiful toolbox for interactive modeling. So I talked about this more last week, the 3-higher whiteboarding toolbox. That's what I'm going to spend the rest of the year talking about, are the different tools. And there's a lot of tools. I'm starting with sort of our main, there's about 30 tools that we're going to learn throughout the year. And really the idea that I talked a little bit about last week is we're taking our thinking. So, through interactive modeling, we moved, we felt, we spoke, we heard, we saw. Now we're going to take what we did with that and we're going to think about it. And we're going to put those thoughts down visibly on a whiteboard so they're large so we can see them. So the teacher can see them, so that our peers can see them. They're extremely visible. But then that's not good enough. We can't assume that our thinking is great. And so next we get feedback. And that's really where the art of whiteboarding is. It's in the different types of feedback that we can give, and then we revise the board, and there's a lot of different revisions we can give as well. Next week I'll go over the whiteboard cycle, which it's kind of whole brain teaching's 4-step engagement cycle. For whiteboarding, we have a whiteboard cycle as well that has several steps to it. That'll be next week. Our rookie tools for whiteboarding. We have some management in there. We have our whiteboarding cycle, a lot of different tools we can use that I'll show you guys throughout the year. The professional tools are all about giving different types of feedback, and so we'll go talk about those. And finally, the all-star tools are all about kind of doing things beyond just one whiteboard, adding more tools into the mix. All right, so that's the whiteboarding toolbox. I'm going to finish with our third toolbox, and it is, of course, Spencer Kagan and cooperative learning. The guy is absolutely brilliant. So Chris Biffle offers a lot of things for free online, but of course Spencer Kagan sells books, and you can really spend a lot of money on cooperative learning. This summer I bought the main textbooks. I bought 7 books, and I just poured through them looking for all the different tools I could find, learning everything I could about cooperative learning. For cooperative learning, you need to have these 4 aspects, and they spell out PIES. So P stands for positive interdependence, where what one student does helps another student, so they feel on the same side. You need individual accountability. Students must perform in front of each other, so they can't hide. Equal participation, so all students feel important, and they get that through equal time and turns. And finally, simultaneous interaction, where you have more than one student talking at the same time. Another great thing about Kagan is it's all about engagement and social skills, and I love their take on social skills, and that's a big difference. The other toolboxes aren't as much about social skills, and Spencer Kagan is, which are those soft skills that kids really need. So just showing you the model of the brain here. So cooperative learning is all about peer feedback. So kids tell their thinking to other kids, or they show it to other kids, they get feedback from those kids, and they think about their thinking. But the thing about this toolbox is the teacher tends to be very removed. The teacher becomes more of the facilitator of the structures rather than involved with the learning itself. So very different toolboxes there. So just like the others, we have the rookie toolbox. It's got a lot of tools in it because cooperative learning has tons of massive tools. They're all about groups of 2, and those are called rallies, and groups of 4, and they call those rounds. But there's so much more to it. And I'm not going to go into it, but I totally, completely recommend reading Kagan books, going to Kagan conferences. He really is a pioneer in changing the micro-learning experience for kids. The professional tools, one of the harder things to do is to get kids out of their seat and moving around. It takes a lot of comfortability. So the professional tools are all the ones that get kids up out of their seats and moving around. And then our all-star tools really dive in depth into the communication skills and the social skills of Kagan, and some structures that take a lot of setup as well. That's our Tier 1 model. 3 different toolboxes and lots of different tools. We're going from a traditional tool set where you got 6 tools, 7, 8 tools in your micro-level learning experience, and now we've got about 100 tools we can use. Because if we do this, then we end up, and here's kind of that final diagram I want to show you guys, where if you combine all 3 toolboxes together and you transition between them when you need those tools, getting away from the traditional toolbox, this is what the brain could essentially look like. We have all parts of the brain, learning, remembering, right, through interactive modeling, and then we think about that in a variety of ways, using whiteboards to make all of our thoughts visible, and then having tons of feedback either from the teacher or from our peers through cooperative learning, and then we revise our thoughts. And all this together makes for a beautiful learning program with many, many tools to learn. Because at the end of the day, if you look at all 3 toolkits, whole brain teaching, whiteboarding, and Kagan's cooperative learning, one of the main things all of them do is they prevent kids from hiding. And when one student raises their hand, or even you cold call one student at a time, they're able to hide. When the teacher is talking, they're able to hide. And when you use all these tools and you perfect the art of using these tools, students can't hide anymore. And you get to see what they're thinking, and you can help them with their thinking. And so that's the overall plan. Next week I'm going to talk a little bit more about traditional teaching tools and about the whiteboard cycle. If you have questions about whole brain teaching, please go to wholebrainteaching.com, watch some of those webcasts. If you have questions about Kagan Cooperative Learning and those tools, please go to the Kagan website. See if you can get your teacher to send you some conferences. At least get a Kagan book and start reading and learning. And I'd also love to send you some of my toolkit stuff, so feel free to send me a message and I'll send it your way. All right, thank you so much for listening. If you have questions, feel free to post them, and I will talk to you soon.